Alright, welcome back. In this video we'll look at getting some code onto the paddle so we can move the paddle. Alright, first thing though, I think the paddle looks a little thick, so I'm just going to click on that paddle and I'm just going to scale it down both on the X and the Y. I'm going to go to 0.75 on both of those. Okay, next thing we'll do is we'll create a new folder here. Okay, so I want to make sure, if you go back to the assets so you don't have to pull it out, I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to call it scripts. And again, just getting into the habit of being organized is helpful. And then in the scripts folder, we're going to create a C# script. Okay, and I'm going to call it probably paddle movement. Again, the more descriptive you can be, the better, because when you come back and you forget what it means, then you know, it just helps that you know it. So I'm just going to double click on that, open it up, and that will bring me to MonoDevelop. So again, Unity is a little bit different, of course, than Python. Okay, so remember we've got to deal with the braces and the semicolons to end lines. We didn't have to do that in Python, and it's good and bad. I mean, it makes it a bit easier, but Python really requires you to format it nicely. Theoretically, in C#, you could go the whole way without, you know, having an enter, right? As long as all the brackets and stuff. For us, having it nice and clean in terms of its format makes it easier, and Python sort of encourages that. So we're going to define a couple of variables first, okay? And the first one is a public variable. We didn't really talk about that, but that lets us access it in Unity. And we're going to set up as a float. So now we know what a float is. It's a decimal number. And we'll call this paddle speed. Okay. And we're going to set the paddle speed. You don't have to, but we will set it here to 1F. And that's because it's a float. Okay. Second variable, we'll also set up as a public. And because we're doing it in a 2D game, whoops, public, we'll set this up as a vector2. Okay, and this vector2 we'll call player position. We don't have to worry about 3D space, so that's why we are just simply going to do it as a 2D. Now, what we're going to do is set that up. So new vector2, and we'll set it to 0, 0. Okay. Again, spacing you could be a bit nicer than I was there. Just put a space in there. It doesn't really matter. Okay. I'm not going to do anything with the start here. We're just going to do an update, and in the update function, we basically want to define a new variable called, we'll call it the Y position. Okay. And just make sure that that's that way. And what we're going to do is we're going to access the game object. So game object dot, and so we're going to grab, of course, my keyboard again. Just 1 second here. We're going to access the paddle, right? So game object is the paddle, and we can do a variety of different things with it. Well, what we're going to do is access its transform component. Oops. Okay, transform component, and specifically its position. Okay, and even more specifically, just the Y, because we're just going to be affecting the Y. And what we're going to do is we're going to add to that based on the input. Okay, so when we press the key, and so we're going to do the get axis just like we did before. Okay, and one day we'll use the mouse. Okay, and some of you have actually played with it. And again, my keyboard. And we're going to use the vertical key, so the up and down arrows, and they have to be spelled correctly. And once we get that in, we're going to multiply it by our paddle speed. And really that just allows us to have some control, okay? So it's, right now it would do whatever, and we need to make sure that it's doing it right. So this here, we've got a little bit of a problem. This needs to have a, close that up there. Okay, so what we're going to do is basically change its Y position, so its up and down position, based on whatever we're going to do with the keys. So if we press the key up, it will move it up. If we press the key down, that actually returns a negative value. And so the key, the Y position moves negative. All right. We're not quite done because we actually haven't changed its position per se. We've just changed a variable. We've given a value to the Y position. So we have to do 2 more lines of code here. We're going to take the player's position, which remember was a vector 3, and we're going to do a new vector 2, I meant to say. And now, if we go back to the game, I think our value, what was it, minus 24 on that paddle? Yeah, so minus 24 on the paddle there. So I'm going to keep the X position constant at minus 24. We don't want it varying from that position. So we'll put that in, minus 24. And then what we want to do is allow it to move up and down, but we don't want it to move outside of the game window. So to make sure that that doesn't happen, again, we have to go into Unity and see where our upper and lower limits are. As I move it up, okay, I can get about there is good. And so I'm looking at about, what, 13? Could I get by with 13? Looks a little bit dicey if I just go to 13 there. So I probably maybe 13. Really don't want it to go off the screen. Let me just see here. I probably have to use a decimal number here. Let me just bring this up. Okay. And so if I bring it out, right, I want to go right to there. Yeah. 14. I think 14 is good. I'm going to go 14, even though it's a little bit off the screen. It just makes it fit, and it should go to negative 14 as well. Okay, so I'm going to go between 14 and negative 14, or actually negative 14 and 14. So to do that, we use this math functions, and it's got a neat name, clamp. Okay, so it's going to clamp it or limit it between 2 positions. And what we're going to do is clamp it on which axis. Okay, we need to know which axis is going to do it. And so that's going to be on the, well, specifically on the Y position, right? We're going to clamp the Y position. And we have to put the negative one first and the other one second, okay, the positive. So it's what we're doing, what we're clamping, and then negative 14 and 14 positive. And that should be it. So I think we need one more bracket. Close it up because it's only a vector 2. Okay. Last thing that we need to do is actually move it. So we're going to grab our game object, dot transform dot position, okay, dot, I guess that's okay because we've got it here, and we're going to set it to the player's position. That's it. So let's see if this works. I don't see any red there, so we should be okay. Okay, so it's saved already. We'll go back to Unity. Now, of course, we're not playing around with the physics at all here. Okay, so it's a pretty simple script. I'm going to make sure my paddle's there. We don't have a script on it. Throw it on. Now we have a paddle speed of 1. So the game starts. Ah, there it is. Up and down, and it's limited to the top and bottom. Okay, so it looks pretty good here. You can, of course, play around with the paddle speed and change it. Okay, and you can actually see how the player's position is changing there because we made the player position public. So only the Y variable is being changed. The X stays as it is. There's not much. There's a little bit of movement after, but not too much. And I think that would be sort of normal. Okay. We might do that, change that around a little bit later there. Okay, but that's sort of the idea. Good. So you've got one paddle done. I mean, we're going to have to look at it. We might later on make this a 2-player game. Okay, we can make another paddle. The other thing we'd want to do, obviously, is have an AI version. And so we'll have the AI version as well. But probably before they do that, we'll probably play around with the ball and use physics to help us out and bounce it. All right, so we'll end this video there with our paddle moving, and we'll come back later on.